rise up high. Turn it up, it's time. Tall boy on the line. Everything will last. Raise your...
Welcome back to episode 278 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And we are honored again to be joined by a guest who joined us 8 episodes ago in episode 270. He has had quite a distinguished police career, has written a number of books, including this one that I have here in my hand, The Godfather of Homicide, which tells you the story of his life and his career within the police force. Turned up the other day. I'm not going to lie, it's a fairly weighty tome, as you can see if you're watching this on the video. So thank you, Amazon, for getting it to me so quickly. So Vernon, would you like to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good. I certainly appreciate the invitation back, and interesting that you have my book. I didn't know you bought the book. Now I can retire. I made $1 and change. Now listen, that book was a legacy book and intended to do one thing and one thing only, to leave a record behind for what I accomplished, and I'm very proud of that. My career in homicides over 50 years, considering my time teaching and in service. And I think today we're going to discuss domestic violence homicides.
Yeah.
Because those used to really bother the hell out of me because there was no need for it. In fact, in 1996 and 1997, I was on the New York State Governor's Commission on Domestic Violence when we had a real governor. So it was quite interesting because we had a potpourri of experts. We had the police, we had the judiciary, we had social services, and we had the women's groups. And at some point, back and forth, there was a little, back and forth about you can't make a woman testify if she doesn't want to. And I'm saying, well, listen, we want to save a life. It's not a matter of what she wants to do. So looking back, that's how I got into this, because some of the cases I had as a homicide commander were outrageous. A lot of these domestic violence homicides are predicated upon rage, anger, jealousy, revenge. All the emotions at the extreme are put into a cauldron. And depending on what's in the mind of the offender when they do this, it could present as a common homicide, or it could be a sex-related homicide, or it could be the most outrageous, bizarre sexual mutilation you ever saw. It's just, it's amazing. And early on, I began documenting these cases and how they occurred and what the conditions were. And as a result, I became a national expert also. I wrote these cases up. And as you showed these cases in different jurisdictions, it would ring a bell to the investigator in the class saying, wait a minute, I missed that. Because there's a lot of dynamics in these scenes that you can pick up on, behavioral aspects and other things. And with the advent of programs like CSI and all these detective programs, a lot of these offenders became clever. And what started out as a instant domestic violence case suddenly took on a different flavor as they attempted to stage the scene to make it appear that someone else did it. So the body would be presented in different formats. It might be a bloody, beaten body, or it might be a nude body, or it might be a semi-nude body, or in some cases, a sexually mutilated body that you wouldn't expect a husband to do to his wife, or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the scenario is, because the domestic violence is any relationship. So early on, when I first saw my first domestic violence lust murder case, I wrote it up. And I said, this needs to be talked about and presented. And the dynamics appeared time and time again in different cases across the country. And when I would show a case like that, it would immediately trigger the investigator who had something similar to realize, hey, wait a minute, I have exactly what you're talking about. I thought it was this, this, and this. So more cases would come to me. And as a result, I ended up on the Commission of Domestic Violence. And probably the most famous case that I got involved with was O.J. Simpson.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Well, when the O.J. Simpson case came in, don't forget, I had a reputation as a professional, as an expert. The defense team tried to hire me. I turned him down. I said, it's a domestic violence homicide. He did it. What's wrong with you, Mr. Geberth? What kind of expert are you? I said, it's the real deal. I said, tell you what, I'll see you on television. And what happened is amazing. When that case went down, I happened to have been in the Chicago area at Northwestern University outside of Chicago, teaching my 1-week advanced homicide school. And I had Chicago homicide detectives in my class. And the case came in. Everybody was talking about it on the TV, on the radio, and they were privy to information no one else had, which they shared with me. And I'm saying they had probable cause to arrest him. And that's why they notified Chicago. This is not a mystery. So I don't know if you ever traveled to Chicago or any place, any of these major cities. Friday night, getting out of these places, prepare to spend 2 or 3 hours in the lounge at the airport.
Yeah.
So I got a call from this producer from this New York television show called Maury Povich. I said, who the hell is Maury Povich? I never heard of him. I don't know
I
why. He goes, oh, Mr. Geberth, we're looking for an expert to discuss the dynamics of homicide investigation. Would you be available for our panel on Monday? I says, I guess you're talking about the O.J. Simpson case. Yes, do you know anything about it? I says, no, but I know about homicide. I went on the panel. Beans, let me tell you, everybody on that panel was pro O.J. I was the ogre. They had his fellow football players. They had lawyers. They had and so when it came to me to speak, I said, listen, there's no mystery here. This is domestic violence homicide. And I'm shocked. I'm shocked at the authorities not making an arrest when he came back from Chicago. I said, let me explain something. You have a forensic case. You have a unique collection of evidence at the location where it occurred, 875 Bundy Drive, and O.J. Simpson's house at Rockingham. You got blood evidence. And I haven't seen the analysis of hairs and fibers, but you have an airtight case. What's the mystery? So 2 of the people on the panel said, oh, I never thought of that. The lawyer on the panel, trying to get himself hired, said, I think that Mr. O.J. Simpson needs the best lawyers available, the best psychologists, and all this crap, because he's trying to get himself on the case. And I'm saying, all right, hey, listen, I got so mad, I stormed off the station. I was so pissed off. The producer's tracing after me. Commander, come back, come in. I said, I'll come back when you do a program on victims, okay, victimhood. And about 1 month later, I brought some victims of domestic violence, homicide, to the program, and we talked about it. So I felt they did something good.
Yeah, yeah. That's really what the story should be about, shouldn't it? In this case, the O.J. Simpson case, because he was so famous, you know, it was all about him, wasn't it? Really. And I'm not going to say the victims were forgotten, but they certainly weren't the focus that they should have been.
Well, the focus was O.J. Simpson was everybody's hero. He ran through the airport. He jumped over the turnstile. He didn't have to take his shoes off. but the bottom line is, it was the media that created this. The media dubbed this thing the trial of the century. That's bullshit. This was a simple domestic homicide. And what's so outrageous is that all the gamemanship in that courtroom and all these experts that knew in their heart of hearts that O.J. Simpson was guilty were out to beat the system. And he wouldn't have beat the system because other than egos. Everybody had an ego in that case. You know, once a week, I was on Inside Edition, the program Inside Edition, to refute what was going on in the courtroom. And one of my expertise, of course, was DNA, because I was teaching DNA ever since they had the Lust murder case in the Bronx, and we talk about Alec Jeffrey. Now I'm teaching it to law enforcement. And so between the time I started with DNA and the O.J. Simpson case came into play, DNA technology had advanced quite rapidly. And there was much more that you could do that you couldn't do when I first started. So the blood evidence, they brought in Dr. Henry Lee. He's a crime scene expert. And he, of course, was refuting the value of the evidence, talking about cross-contamination, I'm saying, yeah, that's fine. There was some sloppiness there. I saw the errors. Don't forget, both sides were using my book. The defense was using my book against the prosecutors, and the prosecutors were using my book against them. I actually sent a free copy of my book to the Los Angeles prosecuting attorney. I said, you better get with the program. They called me up 6 months later. We'd like to hire you. I said, it's too late. You already lost the case. All right. This became a show, a big show. And, it was sad because 2 people were brutally slain and there was no mystery, especially when you do the victimology. If you take a look at the victimology, Nicole Brown Simpson had been making domestic violence complaints against OJ in 1983, 1985, 1993. The police were called to Rockingham 18 times on domestic violence but he was friendly with the police and they were talking with a good old guys type of thing. Oh, yeah, okay, Jay, don't do that again, blah, blah, blah. And prior to this murder, it was building. The intent was building because Nicole was dating other people, including one of O.J. Simpson's friends, Marcus Allen. All right. And O.J. is all over the place. He's dating every girl he can find. And these 2 characters were pushing each other's buttons. And it was bound to be an explosion, Beans, because you can't do that with emotions.
No.
And at one point, he actually was stalking her. He went to her place on Bundy Drive and looked through the window and saw her with another man, and he banged on the side of the house. I mean, that would have been a homicide that night. So it's coming. Yeah. So the night of the homicide, it was June, I don't know, 14th or something, 12th, and they had a recital, and he was at the recital with his wife and their child. He wasn't sitting with them. And after the recital, they went out for dinner, but not OJ. He wasn't included. So now he's angry and it's building. In the meantime, it turns out that Nicole Brown Simpson's mom left a pair of sunglasses at the Mezzaluzza restaurant. So she called up the restaurant and said, listen, my mother left her eyeglasses there. Can someone hold them? And Ron Goldman, who worked there and knew her, said, I'll bring them to the house when I get off duty. He walked in on that scenario with OJ, and it turned into a vicious, brutal slaying. Nicole Brown Simpson's throat was cut on both sides, the carotid and the jugular. Blood all over the place. Ron Goldman, who didn't have a chance next to him, all right, tried to fight with OJ, but by him trying to fight with OJ, it caused OJ to cut himself. So he had blood at that scene. So poor Ron Goldman, he gave his life, but provided us with evidence.
Yeah.
So there's a mixture of blood evidence at Bundy Drive. When the police get called, it's after midnight. They respond, uniform response. And when detectives are notified, the first thing they say is, we got to go to OJ's house. OJ has a track record. He wasn't there. He had left Rockingham to go to Chicago. Now, here's the problem. By the time he finished that homicide, the limo driver was outside Rockingham waiting for him. He couldn't come in the front door. He had to come through a side entrance that only people in the neighborhood knew. When he jumped over the fence, he lost the second glove. So at the Bundy Drive, the right-hand glove, blood-stained, was found soaking wet. At Rockingham, the left-hand glove was found with blood. Inside Rockingham are droplets of blood called passive drug distribution, because when you're dripping blood and there's no force, it's passive. On the floor, on his socks, in the bathroom. So it was quite evident that he was a suspect. That's what's so disturbing about the police investigation. I mean, I know I would have handled it differently, but we're not talking after the fact. So he leaves town. So they're processing the crime scene. It is quite apparent to the investigators and to the authorities that O.J. Simpson is your primary suspect. They call Chicago and tell Chicago to hold him. Now, you don't tell another agency to hold someone unless you have probable cause to make an arrest. And that's where we're at. OJ gets on the phone and he said he was mad. He got excited and he smashed the glass at the hotel room and cut his hand. Well, I was at that hotel room. I saw that. Okay. And I saw some crime scene pictures. Those cuts in his hand are not consistent with glass cuts. Those are knife cuts. Very important. So he agrees to come back, and his attorney, Shapiro, who's kind of a jerk, he's an entertainment attorney, he's not a criminal attorney, allows OJ to be interviewed. Well, the two detectives, Van Natter and Lang, I don't know what the hell they were thinking about. A mere 32-minute interview during which they were talking over each other. OJ couldn't get a word in edgewise. It was almost like they were afraid to confront him. And finally, at one point, they said, listen, OJ, we have a lot of blood here. OJ says, you're telling me there's blood all over the place? At that point, he was susceptible to a confession. All you had to do was brace him. They backed away. Oh, okay, let's take pictures of his hands and end of interview. Well, guess what? You just blew it. I'll tell you right now, if he was in a New York City squad room, we'd have him. No doubt about it. He was ready to confess because he was overwhelmed. So now the fun begins. The 90-minute slow chase through the streets of Chicago. What a joke. Again, in New York, we would have had 2 motorcycle units knock him off the road. That would have been it. And it starts. And in comes the media and the Dream Team. Now, the Dream Team was consistent of a bunch of high-level attorneys, okay? F. Lee Bailey, Johnny Cochran, Olstead. I mean, you name them, they were there. I called them a bucket of snakes, all right? They did everything they could to destroy the evidence. They went after the police procedures. They went after this. They went after that. The bottom line is they couldn't beat DNA. Now, the 2 Weisenheimers that were involved in my case back in the Bronx, 2 defense attorneys, had become DNA experts. They were involved in the O.J. Simpson case. Despite their shenanigans, they could not overdo the advances of DNA, specifically PCR, polymerase chain reaction, which they could increase the amount of evidence to analyze. So in the case, when you think about it, you got O.J. Simpson's blood at the scene. You got his blood at Rockingham. You have a mixture of the victim's blood and his blood at Rockingham. Both gloves have his and their blood. Hair fibers on one glove. In the Bronco that he drove from Bundy Drive to Rockingham, there's blood all over the front seat from the victims and from OJ. Hairs and fibers. The Bruno Magli shoes, remember that? The Bruno Magli shoes, the shoe print. They tried to testify that those prints were not Bruno Magli shoes. They brought in an FBI footwear expert who has one of the books in my series. You remember, Beans, I told you I have 65 titles in my series. That's on footwear evidence. That was it. So it was horrible. It was horrible. From my perspective as a homicide cop, I was getting aggravated. This went on for over a year. Yeah. And here I am every week, no matter where I am giving my programs, they send a crew from New York, from Inside Edition, to question me. And so now I feel I'm part of the case. When the verdict came in, I felt like I lost.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because I mean, you were invested in it. You know,
I was vested in it because they brought me into it. I didn't want to be there. So,
do you mind? Sorry, if you don't mind my asking, how frustrating is it though? As you know, with all that, how frustrating is it with all that evidence that is so overwhelming, and yet the lawyers who can befuddle and just mess around and make it a media case? It must have been really frustrating to watch.
Well, I'll tell you how they did it. First of all, if anybody's to blame for this case being lost, it's District Attorney Garcetti, who moved the case from Brentwood to downtown L.A. That was the same year they had the Rodney King episode. The blacks are going crazy. So Johnny Cochran, playing the race card, he's got a jury full of blacks from downtown L.A. And so the shame of it is they weren't even listening. I guarantee you, if they had a video of O.J. Simpson committing that homicide, they would have had jury nullification. They would have found him not guilty. Horrible. Yeah. Horrible circumstance. And you know, from a professional perspective, it was unnecessary.
Yeah. Excuse me. No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, the whole world watched on in shock and awe at that case. Like you say, the media, well, it became a media circus, didn't it? It became much less about the legal and the strategy, etc., and the case that the police were or building well or badly, whichever what your perspective is. It became like you say, a media circus. Is have you worked on any other cases that were similar?
Well, I've seen it before, but not as much as OJ, because OJ was a popular figure. He was a person that everybody liked. He talked about all of a sudden he became black for the trial, but I'll tell you right now, he was whiter than you and I. He went to the top clubs, the golf clubs. I mean, he was a celebrity. He was on Naked Gun. He was in the movies. Everybody loved OJ, and so OJ. Oh, I can't believe that OJ would do this. Well, let me tell you something. It has nothing to do with who you are. It's an emotional turmoil that takes place. And it was building. This could have been nipped in the bud. That's what's so sad about it. I think during the trial, the prosecution had everything. The prosecution had evidence, witnesses, science, motive. Defense had none of that. So what they did is they created a show. And they blew everything out of proportion, and they started playing the race card. And they started making remarks and this and that. And sadly, the top testifier in that case, okay, was Furman. Furman was their go-to guy because he found the second glove at Rockingham. So he was the court stud, right? The media, they got to give you everybody a name. He's the court stud. Well, guess what? During the trial, somebody notifies the defense that they have him on tape making remarks about the N-word and jamming people up. This was like manna from heaven to the defense. They had nothing, and now they have everything. So they turned this trial of a century into a race war. It became a race war, black against white. And that's not the way it was. No. It's so upsetting because it actually divided the country and the world because people took positions on both sides. Listening to this testimony about Furman and what he said about framing people and calling people in, that didn't help them, especially considering the jurors. I mean, the jurors themselves were basically for OJ and against the police to start off with. If I had to sum this up, because I know you don't want to go too long with one case, but if I had to sum this up, the real outrage was the finding of not guilty. The judge was a fool. He was incompetent. He was playing to the trial. He turned that trial into a three-ring circus. The other element was people who supposedly are officers of the court, know their client's guilty, yet play the race card and prey upon the jurors' ignorance and latent racism. And finally, the prosecutors, they blew it. They had a ground ball homicide case. Instead, they started decorating it and performing for the camera. They didn't allow a witness in because she went on one of the programs. She got $5,000. We can't use her. Yes, you can use her. She saw OJ racing from the scene. She took his plate number down. Ito wouldn't allow certain evidence in, which was prosecutory evidence, which would have inculpated OJ Simpson. Didn't allow it in. And so the bottom line, the real culprit in my mind was the media that decided to turn this into a worldwide soap opera. Everybody tuned in every day for the OJ soap opera, and people lost perspective.
Yeah. And that's what it was. You're quite right. That is exactly what it was. It had become a soap opera. So for yourself, when you were asked, to provide information and you were asked about your level of expertise on this and your book was being used in the trial by both sides, was there a little part of you that thought back to those days when you were a UPS driver or you were doing other things and you were just a beat cop and thought, how has this happened to me?
It's amazing. Well, the book is factual and it's open. Anybody can use the book. I didn't write the book one-sided. I wrote the book straight down the middle. You can take it either way. My biggest fear, and has happened to me, is my book being found in the collection of a serial murder. Okay? And that's happened. The son of a bitch had my book. That is a scary thought because he's reading what I'm talking about behavioral evidence and how to change it. It's this is happening when you write a book. It's open to the public. It's not like a secret document.
No.
But the beauty of the book is the book grew as I got more involved in more cases. So every edition became more significant to the investigative process.
Wow. So, I mean, you don't have to tell us names or what have you, but this serial killer then who had your book, can you tell us a little bit about his case and how he may or may not have used that book?
I really don't want to do that
No, that's
because
fair
of the nature of it, of the case. But let me tell you this, the mere fact that my book was in his library explained a lot of the things that we missed during the investigation. And so that's what's so upsetting. And I've had a number of serial cases that I'm involved with, and what they collect, their libraries are very important, both for pornography and from textbooks. BTK, he had a collection of investigative books as well.
Wow.
So realizing that they have these books is kind of a wake-up call for law enforcement that maybe you should be paying closer attention to what you're doing, because they'll change evidence on you, just like you stage a crime scene. We talked about that case that I had early on in my career where the guy who was going on the police department killed his wife and put her in the bathtub. Well, that was a staged crime scene. But I happened to catch the particular hemorrhage, so I got him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember that case that you
Yeah,
shared.
these cases are in my textbook, all these cases. Another one that got a lot of attention was Drew Peterson. Do you remember the Drew Peterson case? He killed his wife was missing in the Chicago area, Will County, Chicago. His wife Stacy was reported missing. He did not report his wife missing. The family did. His previous wife drowned in the tub. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
And the first two wives left him because he was an abusive personality. Well, let me tell you about Drew Peterson. Drew Peterson, as far as I'm concerned, is a serial killer. All it takes is two, not three, two. When Savio went missing, the Savio girl, he did not report her missing. The family did. Instead, when he was questioned, he said, "Oh, she ran away with somebody. She took $25,000 from the house, her bikini and her passport. So she ran away." Nobody believed that. The family didn't believe that. The Bolingbrook Police Department knew that they could not investigate a case involving one of their own. You have to bring in the state, bring in somebody else. Under ordinary circumstances, that would have been perfect. The Illinois State Police has a very good homicide investigative unit. That particular night, they did not. They had a social promotion that was there, never investigated a homicide, and they had a wise guy CSI that everything was bullshit. And who's orchestrating the whole affair? With Drew Peterson.
Oh,
very, very clever. What he did, he told his neighbors, "I'm concerned about my ex-wife. I haven't heard from her. Maybe you could check on her." And he's wearing his uniform. "Maybe we should get a locksmith and go into the premises, but I can't go in because I'm in a divorce proceeding." So he sends the poor civilians into the house. They go upstairs and they find Kathleen Savio in a dry tub with blood from her head and her body scrunched into the tub. They scream. He runs in like the rescuer. "Nobody touch anything. This might be a crime scene." And he touched everything. One of the women offhandedly said, "I'm surprised that she was taking a shower and there's no towel." He ran back upstairs and put a towel on the bathtub. This is what I'm talking about. Meanwhile, the detective sergeant from the Illinois State Police, God bless him, never should have been in that position. He don't know what is up. He's being manipulated by Drew Peterson and the CSI, who's lazy, only took 4 pictures. You don't take 4 pictures in a death investigation. So anyway, every time he asked, "What about the bruise on the head?" "Well, she probably fell down." "What about this?" "Oh, this means this." So he blew everything off. Now, sadly, the medical examiner was never at the scene. The medical examiner was relying on the medical investigator and the crime scene person to impart what they saw. And they made it sound like an accidental death. So when he conducted the autopsy, all right, he found that it was an accidental death due to drowning because there was water in her sinus in her lungs. Well, that was put there because he was holding the head in the toilet, probably. All right. Okay, that's what's really going on. So he writes it off, and the coroner's inquest, even though the family testified, the coroner's inquest went with the CSI and with the medical examiner. Case closed. Now that Stacy is missing under suspicious circumstances, people are beginning to ask questions. Drew Peterson's going on television, laughing, joking, taking pictures of the media. Everything's a ha ha ha. He goes on a program, Get a Date with Drew. I mean, him and his attorneys were both clowns.
Yeah.
So this caused the district attorney in Will County to ask for an exhumation of Kathleen Savio's body. When she was exhumed, another medical examiner came in and ruled the case a homicide. Now we have a prosecutorial nightmare.
Yeah.
We have one finding accidental, one finding homicide. So what happens is now the pressure's on Drew Peterson. They're finding out more information. They interview the first two wives who talk about domestic violence. Now everything's coming together. They bring in Dr. Michael Barton from New York to do another autopsy. He finds it to be homicide. So now we have two findings of homicide, one accidental. This is going to give the defense attorneys ammunition, but not enough, because the two medical examiners who did the secondary autopsy are well noted in their fields. Okay? They're going to stick by it. What happens is, after trial, he's finally found guilty. But I was on television on another program during this investigation because I was hired by the Illinois State Police as a consultant to review their case. And I said at the time, I don't think that Drew Peterson will ever be found guilty of Stacy Peterson. Okay? What's going to happen, he's going to be found guilty of Kathleen Savio. And that's exactly what happened. Because he was so clever in getting rid of Stacy Peterson's body. She'll never be found. God only knows where he put that poor girl's body.
Yeah.
But these cases are intense, Steve.
Oh, I can imagine. And now, the names didn't ring a bell when you said them there initially. But, when you went through the case, I do recall that case. And bearing in mind, I'm in another country, for those cases to still resonate with me, for me to still remember the details, just the stuff that's shared in the media is enough to make me remember. So experiencing them firsthand and interacting with them, I can't even begin to imagine what that's like.
Well, you're getting the truth. First-hand truth. I'm not decorating it. I'm not taking any glory away from it. I'm making sure everybody who did a good job is recognized. Yeah. Now, every once in a while, I get burned. I took on the Kurt Cobain case.
Oh, wow, really?
Soaked in bleach. I was one of the experts that was interviewed. Let me tell you something. That case is not a homicide. That case was a suicide, straight out. They manipulated that program and that documentary that make me actually look like I was agreeing with them as they took parcels of my statement when I talked about crime scenes and this and that, and used snippets. And every time I came to a conclusion, they didn't put that on. They cut the tape. So I took a look at who was involved. And, in this world of forensics, it's a small world. Everybody knows who the experts are. The guy engineering this was no expert. In my estimation, he's an amateur. But the pathologist is an expert. But I noticed over the years that he always testified opposite of everybody else. Well, they can do whatever they want. I had taught in the Seattle area for 28 years at the time I was brought onto that program. I had access to the Seattle Police Department's homicide files with my affiliations. I actually spoke to a detective that was at the scene. During the documentary, they tried to make it sound like, the uniform officers responded and they automatically made it a suicide and nobody thought it was a big deal. That's not true. When Seattle Homicide was notified, 2 lieutenants and a captain went. The one lieutenant knew who Kurt Cobain was because he was a Nirvana aficionado. He said, we better handle this case like a homicide because it looks like this is going to be a big deal. And that's the way they did. The chief medical examiner himself and his deputy came to the scene to examine. He was in a locked room. There was a suicide note. 2 weeks early, he tried to commit suicide in England when he was out there. Okay? The gun was gripped in his hand. Now, in forensics, there's something called cadaveric spasm. On certain circumstances, when a suicide either kills somebody else or kills himself, the gun is gripped tightly in the hand. You have to literally pry the gun from their hands. His hand was locked on the force start of the shotgun. You could see the imprint on his hand. No doubt in my mind, it's a suicide. But soaked in bleach made it look like something else.
Wow. I mean, so you were asked to participate in that, and then they used your words, twist them, and make it look like, well, not twist them, but share only portions of it and make it look like you were agreeing with the narrative. How frustrating was that?
Well, you couldn't make it look like a murder. All they had was conspiracy theories. They couldn't explain the locked room and that people couldn't get in. The fire department had to break in. They couldn't explain the cadaveric spasm. They couldn't explain the gunshot wound. It was all conjecture. And when you do a documentary, it's like doing a thesis, all right? You already know where you want to go. So
Yeah.
you put the pieces in line.
Yeah. Yeah. That's frustrating. When you were asked to participate in that and look at that, then is there a little bit of you that is concerned that they could do a hatchet job and do something like that they did?
Would you explain that? Would you say that again, Beans?
Yeah, sorry. So when you were asked to participate in that, and
Oh.
you're asked to give your opinion, did you have any concerns in advance that you could be, that your words could be manipulated like that?
Absolutely. Absolutely, my friend. Thank you for answering me that question. Because I saw who they had lined up, and I knew. That's why I contacted the Seattle Police Department. They had no idea of my affiliation with the experts that actually handled that case. And one of the issues was they didn't develop the crime scenes, so they must have been hiding something. No, they didn't develop the crime scene pictures because somebody would have leaked them to what's that magazine that they XYZ or something.
Oh yeah.
They would have put the pictures out. They were trying to protect the integrity of the crime scene. So every issue they raised, there was an explanation, but you wouldn't hear it because I wasn't allowed to say it. So I'm very careful what cases I pick. Believe me, I look at them and I make sure I have a sense of where it's going because I don't want my name to be tainted.
No, I can imagine. But when your name does get attached to things like O.J. Simpson or Kurt Cobain, your name is out there then in the public domain, and as soon as it is, you do lose a little bit of control over what is said, don't you? How did you handle that?
Well, I handled the way I handle everything else. I just told them my opinion. I didn't make it personal. Okay. Although on my website, I did make it personal with the soaked in bleach because I was very upset because people thought, that I was just agreeing with them. But some gal in Germany who turned out to be a nice friend of mine who was following that case, she wrote me up and she quoted it in her magazine. So I kind of set the record straight.
Good.
But I try not to get personally involved, but some things you do feel personal about because of the outrage of what's taken place. I mean, it's horrible. When you see some of these cases, you can't unsee them.
No.
They're there. But I know I did the right thing. And, that's important.
Oh no, and there's one thing that we've learned about you in these two episodes that we've been recording with you. You're very straight talking, you're very to the point, and you're very straight down the line into the middle. And I think that's probably what earns you as much respect as you get. And those cases, then, I don't know. Having seen those crime scenes, when you close your eyes, can you still see them? And not just those crime scenes, but them all.
Some of them, yes. Some of them, yes. Well, you ask me, if I'm telling people I'm working for God, that I gotta subscribe to that. Okay, I cloak myself in the armor of God and my religion because I know I'm doing the right thing. I'm on a mission for the truth, and that's why I don't do defense work. because when you do defense work, you find yourself trying to undo the truth and trying to turn it around. I can't do that. And I don't know how much longer do we have. Much longer do we have?
We got more. Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Okay, let's talk about the defense case.
Sure.
When I first retired, I had already been going across the country teaching. My textbook was out. A former district attorney who I knew in the outlying county, in Westchester County, was assigned a murder case from the bench by the judge. The guy was needed assistance. So anyway, he calls me up and says, Vernon, he said, I have this murder case and I want you to take a look at it. I says, Charlie, I don't do defense work. You know that. He said, I don't. I know that. I never handled a homicide. I'm looking for your expertise. Can you look at the case and tell me what you think? And if the guy did it, I'm going to plead him out. I said, well, I can't resist an offer like that. So I got the case. I'm reading the case. Beans, let me tell you something. It was horrible. It was horrible. As I'm reading this case, I'm reading this guy's confession. There's no doubt in my mind that the frickin' cop wrote the confession.
Oh, really?
It's in copies.
I bet as well when you read those things, you know the mind of these people and you know the way that they word stuff.
I saw it, right. So now I look at the forensics because I don't want to testify to that. I want to talk about forensics. So I went to the crime scene after the fact. I have the crime scene pictures. It's in the middle of the woods, about a mile off the paved road. And the gal in the ditch was a prostitute from the Peekskill area. She was totally nude. Her head had been battered in. Her clothing was pulled off. Everything's at the scene. And the presentation initially looked sexual. But I don't go with the presentation. I want a little bit more than the presentation. The victimology was important. Now I know that she's a pros. And later on, we find out her sister's also a pros. And they work for the same black pimp. Okay. Now, according to the detectives, this volunteer fireman who suffered from epilepsy, he confessed. Well, he never confessed. The poor bastard would go to the prostitutes and hang out and pay them for their time so they would talk to him. Okay, he's just a sad sap. Yeah. And if this case occurred the way they said it occurred, there should have been a potpourri of evidence all over this guy's clothes, his car, and everything else. Nothing. So I don't want to meet this guy. So I hire one of my homicide detectives to interview him. I says, tell me what you think about this guy. The next day, my homicide detective called me up. He goes, hey, boss, you know that guy Pee Wee Herman on television? I said, yeah, this is his frickin' brother. The poor sap. What happened was, as the investigation got a little heated up, they had one of the pros report to the police that this guy confessed to her that he killed her. And now they pick him up, they bring him in, they keep him sequestered from his parents, no lawyer, no nothing. He asks for his medicine, they won't give it to him. They hold him for a number of hours. He was never Mirandized. And the detective writes the confession. It's not his words, I can see that. I alighted from my vehicle. I then picked up the rock, which was on the ground. Come on. It was horrible. So now we're looking at the case, and we got some street informants. It turns out that the gal who was killed, the one in the ditch, that's nude, face battered, she had been in jail on a prostitution charge. When she came out of jail, all the Johns that her sister had went to her. And they told the sister, your sister got a better body than you. So she said to the pimp, I want to kill my sister. And they agreed to do that, her own sister. Wow. So now we have this information. Now, the one smart thing they did, and I got to be honest, the Westchester County detectives are pretty good. But at the time, they had merged two departments, the Westchester County Sheriff's Department and the Westchester County Police Department. One was a certified civil service operation. The other were a bunch of political hacks. So the political hacks came in and gave themselves titles like lieutenant, captain. Well, the jackass lieutenant in this case, he's a perp as far as I'm concerned, right? He's orchestrating the whole thing. And there's one smart thing they did. They must have read my book at one time. Because the body was found in the middle of the woods, they staked out the crime scene overnight. Now, I forgot to mention there were 2 shovels found at the crime scene. What do 2 shovels mean? 2 people.
Yeah.
They were going to bury the body, but the ground was too hard with the rocks. The pimp, who's the head perp, gets another character, gives him crack cocaine to help him bury the body. They show up in the middle of the woods at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the cops come out with flashlights and jump them. What are you doing? Oh, we came here to smoke crack. Oh, yeah, that's their story. Their story's going to fall apart because the guy who still had crack on him, he takes a plea. He's sitting in jail while this trial's coming up. He notifies his attorney, hey, listen, I was hired to help dump the body. This is the guy who really did it. It's now make a deal time. So we have that information. In the meantime, the district attorney's office can't believe that Vernon Geberth is coming in to testify against their case because I taught them. They can't believe it. In fact, when I was on the stand, all the district attorneys came down and sat and watched me. You talk about unnerving.
It must have been unnerving.
It was. I said, well, you know what we did? We identified the real perp in open court. And it was like a Perry Mason moment. The guy is acquitted. The real perp's locked up. That's my defense case. So if anybody ever asked me, I did work one.
I know, and to be fair, a very worthy one as well. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I'd like to think that's unique, but I'm sure that's not the only time that something like that happens.
Yeah. It's people. I'm in the people business. Beans, nothing surprises me. I have seen what you cannot believe I've seen. Husbands sexually mutilating their wife after a domestic homicide because they went on a trip. They psyched out. All right. They had an episode. And for some reason, he's replicating this pornography that he has in his house. And he's doing the same thing to his wife's body. It's amazing.
I mean, it's horrifying. And for someone like yourself, someone like myself, I don't think we can put ourselves in that position. You've seen it. I don't wish to see it, to be clear. And I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine how. And I've said this to yourself. We've had Vic Ferrari on in the past, and we spoke to him about the cases that he's worked. And I don't know how you go on and function as a human being after witnessing the amount of things that you guys witness. I take my hat off to you. I really do.
Well, I'm very lucky. I have a wife who she listens to my stories when I came home from work, and she has a clinical background. She was a clinical social worker. You have to talk this stuff out. And I often talk to people. I says, you can't unsee what we saw, but you can put it away. Because unlike ducks, the ducks are very oily. When the water comes on the duck's back, it goes right away. We're not ducks, so some of it seeps through. And so I imagine that my belief in God and a higher authority, cloaking myself in the armor of God, going to church, praying a lot, okay, and clinicizing the event. Don't forget, I'm clinicizing a lot of this stuff because I'm putting into specific areas that I can put. But the truth of the matter is, I don't dream. But my wife has told me when I came off a case, I was very restless at night. I was talking in my sleep. I said, I hope I didn't say anything. But it's got to affect you. But I attribute that to my preachings and what I believe in.
I mean, that's good that you have your faith. Do you find many people who work in your field, do they have faith in God as well?
I never met a homicide cop that was an agnostic, okay? Because they see what happens. When you die, it's quite vivid. And it's a reminder of what's going to happen to us. Now, if you believe in an afterlife, you believe in a soul, and you believe in a higher authority, fine. That's good because that's going to help you. Because that body on the floor is not your wife, not your sister, not your mother, not your brother. It's a piece of forensic evidence, and it's dissipating right before your eyes. So remove that personality from it and look at the evidence.
Wow, I mean that is the definition of clinical, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess. Don't forget, I got 2 master's degrees. One is clinical psychology. I'm
Excellent.
also a fellow in the American Academy of Forensic Science. So I got all these letters after my name. It says I'm smart. But I'm the
I don't
same
doubt
son
that.
of a bitch, same son of a bitch I was 50 years ago. I never let higher education destroy my morals.
And that, to be honest, that's great. That's great, and I think that's what makes your, I'm not going to say stories, but these cases that you share, the way that you put them across so level-headedly and so matter of fact. I think that's what makes them so interesting. So I didn't make notes. And normally when we have a guest on, I have a lot of questions, but I do know that you like to talk and you do also have a lot of information to share. So I was literally going to ask you about some notable cases. I mean,
I
you've
hope I
already
didn't talk too much.
no. I was going to ask you to talk some more and maybe share another case or two if you have the time.
But anyway, again, with these different cases, I'm looking at different domestic violence cases because I show these cases to other investigators. When it happens in their jurisdiction, they have a frame of reference. And what happens is they call me and share their case with me, and now I bring that out. So I'm constantly building and finding out information. I mean, there was one case that I picked up from Louisiana many years ago, little Jolie Arnold. She became the victim of a stalker. She was in a relationship with a psychopath, and she realized she had to get away from him. And so she did. So she went from Metairie, Louisiana, okay, to Thibodaux, Louisiana, about maybe 75 miles away, to avoid him. You know what the son of a bitch did? He reported her missing to the police to get the police to find her. You talk about a devious bastard. That is devious bastard. So what happens is this guy starts calling up her mother in Houston, Texas. You know what? Have you heard from Jolie? I'm concerned. You know, she's missing from our home and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And now the mother's all very nervous about her daughter. The daughter calls the mother and says, Mom, I'm fine. I'm in Thibodaux, Louisiana. And she gives the phone number to her mother, before the mother knows that this guy has been stalking her. Inadvertently, this guy calls while they're on the phone. Oh, Jolie's okay. I just spoke to her and she's at this phone number. So under ordinary circumstances, Beans, that wouldn't have mattered because it was an unlisted phone number. This guy was such a clever bastard. He actually got the telephone company to disclose the location of the non-published phone. I couldn't get that information. It wasn't the police department.
I bet.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
That's how manipulative he was. He shows up, okay, and he tries to get Joey to come back with him. Of course, she resists, and he ends up stabbing her multiple times. Poor thing, multiple times. Then he stages the scene with bags of marijuana to make it look like a drug case. Well, during the stabbing, he cuts himself. They all do, because the knife gets wet with the blood and slimy. They go down, they end up cutting himself. He goes into the bathroom to clean up. Then he leaves, he gets his car, and he's driving from the scene. Ironically, there's a roadblock. You know why there's a roadblock? It was Good Friday. It was for the procession of the cross. He thinks the roadblock's for him. He jumps out of the car and he runs up to the police. I witnessed a homicide and I've been injured. So I would have to say that God got him, okay?
Yeah, 100%.
And the case comes together. I met the mother. She was devastated. I met the officers that they had taken my class. And those were the people that I put on the Maury Povich show, the mother and the girlfriends, because the girlfriend of the deceased had also been stalked by the same bastard. So these people are dangerous, very dangerous.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I mean, I find it terrifying that there's people out there, and I also find it a shame. So you've shared like the case of the serial killer there. You shared that fellow, two clearly very intelligent individuals. I just find it a real shame that they didn't use their intelligence for something more useful.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I don't have the answers. I mean, it's people, it's personalities, and on the face they may look okay. All right, they may present normal, but there's something going on inside their head, and some people pick up on it, and some people don't.
No. No. You know, funnily enough, like I say, my cousin is in the police force in Texas, and you know, and that's what he tells me his job is to read people. Because he's a
Oh
people person.
yeah,
Yeah, is
oh
to
yeah.
read.
Your life may depend on it.
Yeah.
When is he on patrol?
I know what I like. So he's like the chief of veteran affairs, I believe, in San Antonio. So no, I don't think he does patrol, but he is out and about there. You know, he's stationed out there.
Because the best test of that, when you pull somebody over, you better be able to read them. Your life may depend on it. So when I hear these silly liberals talk about you shouldn't approach a gun, the person with a gun in your hand, yeah, you freaking kidding me? He may have a gun. I got to draw first. I got to go home. That's my job.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't know. It's hard to explain unless you've been there.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah, I can't begin to understand. I can't put myself, you know, given the jobs that I've done in my career, nothing like that. Now I've got to ask you then, you know, on your name across the bottom there, it says retired. How retired are you?
I'm retired in that I'm not out there teaching anymore, but it's still in my DNA. Beans. I still get calls from people. In fact, when that Mangione character shot the CEO of the health care, I was called the next day by the media, and they asked me my opinion, and I gave him a profile. This is not a professional killer. He's trying to make a statement. It's agenda driven. He probably has a document. Sure enough, everything has turned out to be the truth. So I stay abreast of what's happening and I look at cases. But as far as getting involved in cases anymore, no, I don't have the time because I know in my heart of hearts, if I take a case, I'm going to put too much time in. I've already taken enough time from my wife and my family, especially my wife. I mean, let's face it. First, I was in the police department. Then I go on the road three weeks a month. I'm like an absentee husband. So that's not good.
No. Do you miss it though?
I'm sorry.
Do you miss it?
Do I miss? You know what I miss? I miss the camaraderie and the affiliations, the troops. I miss the troops. I don't miss the bullshit. I don't miss the bureaucracy. I don't miss the double players. I don't miss the sneaks and the rats. Because I always said, the hardest part of this job are the people within the job because they're dangerous people. They were never cops. They don't think like cops. They think like bureaucrats, and they're all trying to climb the ladder. And if it means stepping on 2 or 3 cops to get there, they'll do it. And I have no use for them. And when I was in the job, I called them out. But today, I'd never get away with it. What saved my ass is when I came into the job, corruption was systemic, and a lot of cops were doing things they shouldn't do. I never did. I was a TPF cop, Tactical Patrol Force, Green Berets, pure of heart. I kept notes. Later on, when they all discovered religion, because the biggest thieves become the biggest preachers. They're like reformed alcoholics, right? The same people that were stealing the stove and coming back for the smoke are suddenly integrity officers. So when they would try to target my people, I turn around and say, "Don't fuck with them because I know what you did," and I kept notes.
Brilliant. So we're round about the hour mark now, which is where we like to wrap things up. Normally I'll leave it to Gaz to sum things up for this episode, but have you got any final thoughts for us? Any thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
My final thoughts are that God bless the people that do this job because they need all the help they can get. And I thank you for the opportunity to come on and share my experiences. And there's so many cases, Beans, that I could probably spend a week talking to you, but I won't bore you with a week's worth of work. But some of those cases are interesting because they have a national and international flavor.
Oh, no doubt. And listen, if you ever want to come back on and share some more of those cases with us, we'd love to hear them. This hour has absolutely whipped by. I can't believe that that we're an hour done already. It's been phenomenal. And certainly when you said you wanted to talk about certain cases today, I didn't expect them to be the cases that you brought up.
Well, I wasn't sure which cases I was going to share with you, but then I was thinking, no, these are good cases. These are something people know about.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And the last of all, though, I would like to, suggest that our listeners head out over to Amazon and they can pick up your book. Like I say, The Godfather of Homicide. I picked up a copy. I'm off on my holidays in a couple of days' time, so I'll be taking this away. Hopefully my kids will give me a little moment there to read it.
Well, you'll know more about me than I know when you read that book.
That's a scary thought.
Thank you very much. You take care. And God bless.
No, thank you very much. Take care.